Ohio State's signing class, 2024 signing class, as we record this, is a top 5 class by the consensus of the rankings that are out there. We think that's going to hold even as more announcements, more signings keep coming in. Andrew, does this feel like a top 5 class that Ohio State has put together? And if so, or if not, why not?
It feels like a very good class, and I think top 5 is fair as long as you're putting it towards 4 or 5. Because if you look at some of the other areas that you would be concerned about with this Ohio State team, they're the same areas that we have been talking about on Buckeye Talk since I got here in July. They're the same areas that you guys have, I'm sure, have been talking about and are sick of talking about because you've been talking about them for years. The defensive line class, you have a 5-star defensive lineman. Hey, good job. Like they had to, grit it out to really keep Edric Houston in the class. But 2 defensive linemen is probably not where you want to be, especially when one of them is kind of a developmental 3-star player. You're talking about a guy who's ranked in the 700s of the 247 composite rankings. And you had another 5-star in this class. That's just, that's not great. Then you look at the offensive line recruiting. Do you feel great about that? They swung and missed on Jordan Seaton. There were guys that they swung and missed on throughout the last couple of months that you look at and say, man, this would have really rounded out this class. Like Kingston Viliamuasa commits to Notre Dame. Amaris Williams just a little while ago committed to Auburn, and Ohio State was in on trying to flip him, a defensive lineman. They missed on Carlin Jones, who decommitted from Nebraska, then committed to USC. Like there were all these guys that you could go through and be like him, and you can round out the class in a way that you can't right now. Jordan Seaton commits to Colorado. He hasn't officially signed with Colorado yet, but there were just these guys you could point to and say, wow, if you had that, or if you had him, or if you had this, you could feel so much better about this particular class. You feel great about Jeremiah Smith. Ryan Day he almost collapsed when he found out they were gonna keep Jeremiah Smith. You feel great about him. You feel great about Aaron Noland. You feel great about Mylan Graham. You feel great about the corners you bring in. There are a lot of really good to this class, but compare it to some of the other classes, Alabama, Georgia, you just don't see the same well-rounded nature of this particular class, which puts it up in the top 2, 3. It's a very good class, top 5 class, but it doesn't feel like a top 3 class.
So it does feel like a
It
top
does
5
feel
class.
like a top 5 class, not like a top 3 elite level class.
I feel like, Stephen, we were having the same conversation a year ago at the other side of this field, almost the exact same video. People will probably go back and watch from last year's signing day that, and I think that some of the same points are there, right? Like, where's the elite offensive tackle that you really desperately need for the future of this program? Where's the next, it's probably edge rusher, those sorts of things. Like, we were still asking some of those same questions, and even this class answers some of those, but leaves other questions sort of unanswered. And the wide receiver rankings are always keep pushing up the overall ranking of this program. So does it feel better than it did a year ago? Do you come out of this day feeling like this is a better class than what Ohio State was able to put together last year, even when we had some of those same questions?
I almost want to say exactly what Andrew said, except take the name Jeremiah Smith out and put Brandon Dennis in. Take the name Justin Scott out, put the name Keon Keeley in. And it's the same exact conversation. It's not a complete class. It's a really good class. It's an elite class. It's just not complete. Ohio State got better. They replenished the areas they're already good at, while they didn't improve the areas that need improvement. And that's been the theme the last couple of years. But I do think it's better. And some of it's narrative stuff. Edric Houston is a kid from Georgia, from SEC country. Now, Georgia doesn't have a large history with Buford either, which is the same school Harry Miller is from. So it's not like you were going to lose him to Georgia. But that's a kid from the heart of SEC country. And you fought off Bama for him. That's got to matter. Because it's been the last time they got a kid out of the SEC and they fought off Bama for him. His name was Chase Young, and he was okay, I guess. Okay here, just decent. So that matters. The fact that you went down, Larry Johnson went down there and won a battle in the SEC. The fact that Jeremiah Smith has been committed for literally a year, and yet Brian Hartline had to fight for his life up to the last minute, and he won over potential NIL reasons, that matters, because last year they weren't. Whenever we said, they lost this battle because of NIL, it just was always a loss. This year, not as much. NIL didn't get in the way. And I think that as a fan, if you're worried about where Ohio State is in NIL, they're probably still some steps behind where some of these other programs are, but at least it's improving. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, there's optimism there, even if, yes, Andrew, you're right. They're missing offensive linemen. They're missing defensive linemen. But they at least are still good at the spots that we know they're going to be good at. And you can see improvement on the thing that's going to matter the most as we get deeper and deeper into this year by year. And that's NIL. And there's no way to sugarcoat that anymore.
It's tough. I mean, to talk about a like complete class, like, are you going to get a 5-star at like literally every position on the field? Like, no, that's not going to happen. You're probably not even get a top 100 guy at like literally every position on the field. So we have to be a little bit careful that we're not raising the standards to that level. I do think, though, it is fair to come out of these days and acknowledge the collection of talent that was put together, and then still ask, like, okay, well, how many more cycles are you going to go without like getting a big-time offensive tackle? Like, how many more cycles are you going to go without, with feeling like you went in and really landed your defensive line plan? Obviously it happened in 2021, but I don't think it's happened since then. So now you're getting, usually when it's like things don't happen for back-to-back years, that's where you get in trouble. And Ryan Day is still talking with a lot of optimism about how good this defensive line could be next year because of who might come back. I still have questions about what the 2025 defensive line is going to be, though. That's what today's signing day is about. It doesn't really have anything to do with next year. It's look ahead 2-3 years down the line. We did this in 2021. We looked at that signing class, and we were like, man, this could be like an amazing team. Like, but who's going to play offensive tackle? And it took them a while to figure out who was going to play offensive tackle on this team, and the results were mixed. And this team didn't achieve everything it wanted to. So just keep those sort of things in mind as you're evaluating this, that it's great to be a top 5 team in the rankings. I think Ohio State should pretty much always live there. The floor is going to be very high on the talent that they bring in. But I think, again, history has shown us that it is okay, that you're not nitpicking to say, okay, but at this important, critical position, now you've gone multiple years without landing what looks like a difference-making player. Why isn't that happening, and how are you going to get that solved? And those are the kind of questions we are asking today at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that on Buckeye Talks. So get that wherever you can find podcast, and get the text 614-350-3315. News, updates, analysis, all the way through the Cotton Bowl and beyond from cleveland.com.